In the last 24 hours, people have been lamenting the loss of Jim Harbaugh all over again due to the fact that a new book is coming out about college football from Armin Katayan, and there is a chapter in which details a bit of the Harbaugh departure. And there's a part in it in which it gets into what happened after the national championship game, but before he left for the Chargers. So is Ward Manuel actually the problem? It's being read that way by a lot of people. I have a differing opinion. I know I'm contrarian when it comes to this, but we're going to get into it here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday. We're back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I apologize in advance. I have a bit of a cold, so there's just moments where I'm almost better. But it was a 24-hour cold, so I'm almost better. So if I start coughing or something like that, just apologies in advance. So, all right, we get to this book here, which is called The Price. And there's a chapter that talks about the Connor Stalions. No, not the Connor Stalions. I'm just reading Connor Stalions. The Jim Harbaugh departure. I'm going to read to you the two excerpts that I used for the Wolverines Wire write-up I did on it. CBS is the one who obtained the excerpt. And then we'll discuss both things. So let's read the second one first, because that's the one that everyone's more so discussing, is these 3 paragraphs or 2 paragraphs or whatever. During a 2-day getaway with his wife, Sarah, on Coronado Island off of the coast of San Diego, Harbaugh unloaded to a longtime friend, Todd Anson. And I know Todd quite well. He told Anson he wanted to remain at Michigan, but believed Manuel, no matter his public pronouncements, was not the advocate he needed in his corner, particularly in front of the Board of Regents. He also raged against Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti, who, before the 3-game Big Ten suspension, had promised to meet Harbaugh in Ann Arbor and brief him on what the conference was doing, only to stand him up. Through a spokesperson, Petitti declined an interview request. The day after his outburst to Anson, Harbaugh had an initial interview with the Los Angeles Chargers. Afterward, his tone had softened. Leaning toward taking taking the NFL job if offered, he dialed down the Manuel rhetoric, no longer interested in a potential legal battle and fighting with people he later said were gunning for me, and that those are in quotes, gunning for me. It suggested in attitude and tone that his days in Ann Arbor were numbered. Indeed, they were. So that is being presented to a lot of you as Ward Manuel is the reason why Jim Harbaugh left. If there was no Ward Manuel, it's a different story. But if you're reading it that way, you're not reading it correctly, because that's not what it's saying. Now, it does have a part in it here where Manuel, he doesn't believe Manuel is the advocate that he felt he needed. Okay, that says it right there. Was not the advocate he needed in his corner, particularly in front of the Board of Regents. So there are already layers there. Wants an advocate in front of the Board of Regents. Now, I know at least 2 regents that were firmly like, you know what, give Harbaugh whatever he wants. If any trouble comes our way, then we'll deal with that. Harbaugh is the guy we need, and we'll stay in his corner. But that's 2. And I know certainly there's more than 2, but just I know 2 for sure that are in that camp, right? But you have to keep in mind, the Board of Regents is going to protect the University of Michigan. So that's one layer. But why would the Board of Regents, why would he need an advocate in front of the Board of Regents? Because of the Big Ten being one. We already saw how that played out, right? Unfortunately, it didn't play out well for Harbaugh in the way that all of that went with a 3-game suspension. Michigan goes to fight it, and then they drop it, right? So that's part athletic department, that's part Board of Regents. So then you have the Big Ten. And then above the Big Ten, you have the NCAA. And that's where we're going to get to the next part, and we're going to do that in segment 2. But you have the NCAA. Those are the layers of the onion. The front door is Ward Manuel, right? And as it says, he softened on the Ward Manuel rhetoric. But certainly he felt that despite the public pronouncements, Ward Manuel wasn't the defender that he wanted against the university, who was going to be looking out for university interest, which it should, by the way. I know that there's a lot of people. I've been warning you against this for months. Obviously not. We haven't talked about it since before, after January here. But I warned you about it for months that if there was a battle for the, against the NCAA and Michigan, there's an element where Michigan has to protect itself, right? If Michigan went ahead and said, we're going to give you everything you want, Jim. We're going to give you full confidence. You can't be fired for any kind of anything. And then the NCAA comes out and says, you know what? You can hear Zuri in the background because there's a train. She's very excited about trains. That's going to persist for a minute. But if the NCAA says, you know what, Jim, we're giving you a 2-year show cause and you're effectively suspended for 2 years. If Michigan gives Jim what he wants and has a provision that nothing can happen, Michigan is just kind of up the creek for 2 years because now they're going to owe him more money than any other school because they were going to make him the highest paid coach. It had a favored nations type deal in the offer, supposedly, that was going to keep him as the highest paid coach in college football, if memory serves. And so, therefore, they'd be on the hook for the highest paid football coach without having the said football coach, if that is what the NCAA wanted to do. So when you boil it all down, what is the root cause for Jim Harbaugh leaving? Because the university would be well within its rights to be like, we want some protection here. We don't want to be on the hook for 11, 12, 13, 14, $15 million. Only to have it where the NCAA comes down hard on him because they have a vendetta. And therefore, we're going to find ourselves in a position where we're on the hook for that. We don't have a football coach, but we got to get someone to coach the team, and we got to pay someone that type of commensurate pay. And yet we're just out all this money. University, the Board of Regents is within its rights to believe that. It all comes down from the actions of the Big Ten as well as the NCAA and its investigation, which is through no fault of Jim Harbaugh's own when it comes to the Connor Stalions stuff. All right. So unfortunately, you're looking at it wrong if you're looking at Ward Manuel as being the scapegoat here, because you peel back the layers of the onion. He just wanted someone that he knew was going to say, hey, no matter what. Unfortunately, Ward, I'm sure, feels the same way that I do about it, which is like you have to have some level of protection if the NCAA comes down hard on you. It's nothing against Jim Harbaugh. I understand Jim Harbaugh is innocent. That doesn't mean that the NCAA isn't going to do something that puts Michigan in a bad spot. And I hope you understand that. Like, Michigan would be, that would be a terrible place for the athletic department and for the University of Michigan to be in if all of that went through. Let's talk about the next part, which is the NCAA part, which shows you exactly why what I'm saying makes sense. We're going to do that here in just a moment. Before we do, let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much everything and anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, the data, the tools you need in order to help you reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They're the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, it's the brand behind every great investor. YahooFinance.com That's the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Fun things to have a cold in the middle of summer. I know people, I was texting with Jake Butt. He's like, how you doing, man? I'm like, sick. I'm getting better. And he's like, you're always sick. I'm like, no, I'm always injured. I have a lot of allergies, though. That's the new thing. So we're trying to heal all these things, doing things proactively so that, we can do whatever. But that's also why we have such a late show today. I know we do shows late, but we have a later than usual even show because needed to be kind of this morning. It was like, and then it's just been rising. Never really had like a 24-hour cold, but that's kind of where we're at. Had the whole shebang. All right, so I'm on the wrong page here. There we go. So earlier in the excerpt, there's another interesting part. It's kind of the prelude to this, but I felt like we needed to address the Ward Manuel part first. But again, peeling back the layers of the onion. I'm not saying Ward has done everything perfectly, so don't misunderstand me. There have been a lot of missteps and the slow-footedness on NAL and all this. Yes, I am a Ward defender in 90% of things. He's not the boogeyman you think he is, for those who are very against him. There are certainly some shortcomings, though. Just like there is with anybody. If there's no perfect... Like, I have problems with Santa Ono as well. I'm not going to share them here, but I do. But I have more appreciation for Santa Ono than I have problems. And no one's perfect. And the sooner you realize that, the better. I mean, Jim Harbaugh wasn't perfect, right? Stodgy in a lot of ways. Took him a long time to beat Ohio State. Ohio State was miles ahead of him, but there was some stodginess that kept him from being in a good position. Loyalty to Don Brown didn't help. Even after it became obvious to other staffers that Ohio State had Michigan's signs, Don Brown's signs in particular, didn't demand a change there. Yet they tried to subvert it. They tried to get it so they changed the signs. They changed them for a minute. And then Don Brown nixed it after or somewhere around week 1. And then they started to try to change signs in order before Ohio State again in 2019. And then Don Brown nixed it the week of the game and went right back to the signs that Ohio State already had. And thus things went the way they did. And certainly Jim Harbaugh probably knew of all of that. I can't tell you for sure, but I know that I was told by multiple people inside the staff that that was the case. And yet Don Brown continued to be the defensive coordinator for a whole nother year. So there's other problems. Let's get to this CBS excerpt here. In the wake of the Connor Stalions sign-stealing investigation, NCAA enforcement had made yet another sweeping request for Harbaugh's school-issued and personal cell phone records dating back 18 months. In response, Harbaugh's attorney, Tom Mars, wrote a stinging email saying he would need to review 6,199 emails plus text. And, oh, by the way, your request is illegal under Michigan employment and privacy laws. Quote, outrageous and offensive and without probable cause, end quote. Parenthetical, and it wasn't just Harbaugh. The NCAA had demanded similar records from the entire coaching staff only to drop that request. End parenthetical. I do know that to be true. In the end, Mars knew Harbaugh would eventually face 2 committee on infractions hearings before what he deemed a hostile crowd and a certain suspension that could cost him half a season or more. Quote, I will tell you this. I told Don Yu, Jim Harbaugh's agent, and Jim as clearly as I could, more than once, more than twice, that in my opinion, if he stayed at Michigan, the committee of infractions is going to punish Jim under the vicarious coach's responsibility legislation, and he's dealing with a committee on infractions that's clearly manifested bias against him. He's going to sit out 4 games, maybe 6, and whatever we do, the committee on infractions is going to find him guilty. That is the center of the onion. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what happened, right? I can also tell you that the NCAA didn't meet with Connor Stalions until sometime in the last couple weeks. That's the first time. They didn't talk to him. They didn't meet with him. They didn't even know what the center of the entire thing was. The person who was in the center of this entire investigation, they didn't even talk to him until sometime in the last 3 weeks, right? So that should tell you a little bit of something about what, how everything was kind of going. It was all geared towards Harbaugh. They didn't really get answers. They didn't and Michigan didn't talk to Connor either. So it wasn't like Michigan had answers. The NCAA didn't. Everyone in Michigan was just in the dark, essentially, finding out things from the news just like anyone else was, right? That's true, unfortunately. And yet, you had the NCAA just, you could feel the vitriol. You could just absolutely feel it. It was thick as paste while that was happening in October, November. Just the fact that they were guns a-blazing for Harbaugh. And Tom Mars is 100% correct here. They wanted everything. Like, I've heard from multiple people about how they wanted everything. And that extends to some of the other tertiary investigations. That even extends to Central Michigan staff. They wanted everything. Give us all your work phone, your personal phone. We want to do this. And this isn't a court of law, right? Like, the NCAA is not the FBI. And even then, like, the right to discovery, I'm not a lawyer, but they don't have subpoena power. It's to be able to do the types of things. And the NCAA knew something had happened, and it had a conclusion, and it let that conclusion, the conclusion of what it wanted to find, essentially, out to the press. I hate to relitigate all this, but that's what this is. I'm just kind of adding some color to this. They had a conclusion they wanted to find, and they let that get leaked to the press initially through Yahoo, with the fact, hey, they have an investigation, with more meat on its bones from Pete Thamel and ESPN. And then with kind of what they wanted to tell you through the Washington Post, with that whole thing, with the whole, like, it was on a computer that coaches had access to. Now, the coaches had access to that computer the same way that if you walked into my house, you would have access to it, right? Like, you don't, right? It's password locked. You're on your own phone on my Wi-Fi. That doesn't mean you have access to my computer. But they were telling you exactly what they wanted to find through the press. I understand I am the press, but that's also why I'm trying to help you understand what was happening there. And they tried to work backwards to that conclusion. Here's what we believe happened. We're going to find a way to punish you for it. We need to piece together enough to make these things happen. So that's where you get to, like, the Chris Partridge thing, right? Like, all of these players suddenly are being called in to talk to the NCAA investigators. They're not even being told until kind of after the fact, if my understanding is correct, that, hey, you're allowed to have a lawyer present, and you should have a lawyer present for all of this. So Partridge told some players, like, hey, don't say anything that you think happened, because they didn't know anything that happened. So, but he's just saying, they're like, hey, you don't have a lawyer present, so don't just start going speculating and trying to say things, because they're trying to work backwards. And then one of the players tells the NCAA, and I don't know if this is common knowledge or not, but I'm telling this to you anyway. One of the players tells the NCAA, Chris Partridge told me not to say anything. He didn't know anything. He just didn't understand what was going on, and therefore he loses his job. The whole point of this is to explain to you the vendetta that the NCAA had for Jim Harbaugh. The NCAA is the center of the onion. Not Ward Manuel. It isn't yes, he distrusted Ward Manuel. It makes sense that he would distrust Ward Manuel because of what happened with the first 3-game suspension. What happened even in this one. I don't think that Chris Partridge should have been fired for that. But Michigan kind of had no choice. I think they should have just suspended him. But when the problem is the NCAA is bearing down on them like a freight train. Unfortunately, anyone that kind of bucked what the NCAA wanted was going to be a casualty for Michigan to stay on the up and up, above board, all of that stuff. And for the Big Ten, who suddenly became a player in the whole thing. kind of a lose-lose situation for Michigan. We're going to continue on. We'll bring this all home here in just a moment. Before we do, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So go out there, pick a ringer, the team that you know is going to win without a shadow of a doubt with $5. You can have $150 to play with. You can use that to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, a heck of a lot more. Heck, they've got blackjack and all of these things in there. It's a fun time if you're smart about it. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's bring this home here. So you can kind of understand with the picture I painted here. Harbaugh, you also have to understand Harbaugh had achieved all of his goals at Michigan. He had won a national title. He had beaten Ohio State 3 years in a row. Yes, still had a losing record, 3-4 against Ohio State. If I'm right, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 3-5. 3-5 against Ohio State. So there's that. Middling kind of, was he 500 against Michigan State? Unfortunately, loses 15, wins 16, loses 17, wins 18, 19, loses 20 and 21, wins 22 and 23. But wins the national championship, gets Michigan back from the brink. He's offered more by the Chargers, a team he played for, they had a lot of respect for, than he was offered by Michigan, which is kind of shocking. Everyone thought that if there was any team that was going to offer less than Michigan, it was going to be the Chargers because they're tight-pocketed. So you have that aspect. You have the fact that it took all of a day, right? So just to go back to this, the day after his outburst to Anson, Harbaugh had an initial interview with the Chargers. Afterward, doesn't care about Manuel, not interested in the legal battle, right? Like, the whole thing that people are hinging on is the part that I didn't read in here. Harbaugh told people he wanted to stay at Michigan. Yes, he wanted to stay at Michigan, but there were other things that made it either untenable or just not as sexy as it was before, right? Because he stays at Michigan, there's no doubt the NCAA is still gunning for him. They'd continue to gun for him. And Michigan would sit there and be kind of leery. And yes, it was giving him almost everything you wanted, it sounded like, in what it was offering him. But certainly, there were going to be ramifications to his return. He meets with the NFL, and suddenly it's like, you know what? It's time. I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to continue to say that this is Ward Manuel's fault, yada, yada, yada. I would also say, despite the fact that he told people behind the scenes he wanted to stay at Michigan, this is still the same guy who, for different reasons, I'll credit that, spent 3 straight years interviewing for NFL jobs. Year 1, Vikings wanted that job, thought he was getting that job, didn't get that job. Says he's going to stay no matter how long Ward Manuel wants him. Year 2, felt like it was posturing to try to get Michigan to kind of get on board. This is where I do fault Ward. Get on board with the changing culture of college athletics. Heck, according to what I saw right before we started this episode here, the NCAA is allowing schools to pay players directly. I don't understand it yet, so I'm not really feeling like I'm going to do an episode or talk about it until it kind of gets spelled out a little bit more. But, it's like I said on the show the other day, they're not going to suspend all 130-something teams and say, you're all sitting down. So Michigan needed to find a way to get on board and still stay, true to what Michigan's ideals are, right? But nonetheless, that's why Jim, as far as I believe, don't know for certain, but as far as I believe, interviewed with NFL jobs in the second year after 2022 to get leverage with Michigan. Does that. Jim, still under contract, by the way. It wasn't like he was in an expiring contract. His contract I know they still were trying to reconfigure it. It had been reconfigured, I believe, from the 2021, after the 2021 season, but it still wasn't commensurate with his actual worth. Negotiating a new contract, but the NFL comes calling amidst the NCAA stuff. It's a perfect storm. So you can believe what you want. I just don't want to see all of you sit here and wring your hands over this idea that the same way that the Ohio State fans, the hammer's dropping, the hashtag fire Ward people. I am sorry, but you are, unless something else happens, that, something comes out that hasn't been previously out that I don't know about, unless there's like a new circumstance that happens, chances are Ward Manuel's not going anywhere. So this is just a cautionary kind of warning to you to don't get your hopes up for something that's not going to happen. And it's also not necessarily as bad as you think. Now, I know this will probably be the type of show that gets a lot of the dislikes on the YouTube, but I'm telling you what I know, and I'm telling you how to read between some of these lines. That's Harbaugh's side, but even on Harbaugh's side, you can peel back the layers and come to understand why the decisions got made the way that they got made. Was Ward a barrier in his eyes? Yes, absolutely, and understandably so. But why did Ward feel like a barrier to him? Well, because of all these other entities, right? There are levels to this. And it's disappointing to see a lot of other outlets out there kind of just Ward, Jim Harbaugh left because of Ward Manuel. That's not what he's saying. It's flat out not saying that. You just heard the entire thing as written. If you believe it that way, then I incline you to read it again. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back on Friday, assuming that we continue positive health things like we got today, so that's good. And we will... I had an idea. I don't know if we're going to go with that idea, so we'll leave it up in the air for now. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.